for union with God,
Sorry.
then the only way for us to have union with God is for one of us to attain to the same status as God, right? Somebody from the creaturely side has to attain to Godhead status, which is not possible. The only other possibility, or probably the way to say it, is the only real possibility, the only realistic possibility, is for someone in the Godhead to become a human being. And so it's as you study the incarnation and you study the relationship between God and man, and you study what God is doing and bringing us into union with himself, you realize quickly that it had to be the Son. It couldn't be the Father. It couldn't be the Spirit. It had to be the Son. Because the image that in Jesus is the image. Paul says all over the New Testament, he is the image after whom we are made. So why it has to be the Son is because what's being earthed is the relationship between the Father and the Son. So Jesus brings us into that fellowship by becoming what we are. So we're brought into that fellowship prior to our confession of faith or whatever. When you understand what the incarnation does, that the incarnation unites humanity with God so thoroughly that you can no longer say God without saying God and man together in union.
Amen.
That's good.
And the only way for you to I never believed in like eternal conscious torment, eternal conscious hellfire, that sort of thing. But what I believed in is called annihilationism. Okay, there's going to come a time God's going to say, all right, you know what? You're just not on board with the program. We're going to burn you up. And at least that's merciful, right? Because here's what you can say to people that talk about eternal conscious torment. First of all, now they're starting to call it ECT because it sounds so grotesque they don't want to say it. Like we say STD because that's more polite than saying sexually transmitted disease, right? So years ago, there was this Jordanian pilot that was shot down in Syria, and these ISIS fighters put him in a steel cage and dumped gasoline on him and lit him on fire and burned him alive.
Wow.
But he died and his suffering ceased. So really, your God is less merciful than ISIS? Because he's going to burn. They're never going to die. Their suffering will never end. So I always believed in annihilationism. God will just eliminate you from the cosmos. But see, that's not a possibility anymore because Jesus has brought all of humanity into union with himself so thoroughly that if the Father were to annihilate you from the cosmos, he would have to annihilate his Son from the cosmos.
Come on.
So it's like a coffee cup. Jesus is the cup. We're the coffee. You're in Jesus. And so long as the cup is safe, you are safe. And if the cup goes down into the grave, the coffee goes down into the grave. If the cup comes out in resurrection, the coffee comes out. And if the cup ascends to the right hand of the Father, well, that's where the coffee goes.
That's right.
Seated.
Seated.
Analogy.
Seated. That is
That's right.
Analogy.
Yeah.
And I'll say this to the deconstruction movement. I was thinking about this the other day. I've got 3 really close friends. In fact, in April, we're going to get together up in the mountains of North Carolina and just hang out for a couple of days. And if they spoke ill of my wife, we could not be friends. I could not accept the words from their heart when they say they love me. If you say you love Jesus Christ, stop bad-mouthing his wife.
Wow. So good.
Because the church is the bride of Christ.
That's right.
So if we're going to deconstruct away from religion, let's do it.
Yeah.
But don't mean mouth the Lord's wife.
That's right. That's good. So good.
I'm very silent right now.
Oh,
Hey, I've been there.
yeah,
That,
that's
that-
really good.
although,
That was a word for me, for my
Oh.
past self.
Mm.
no, it feels like that's a continual word for, for all of us, just to keep
Yeah.
remembrance, how important that is. That's good. I'll take that. That's really good.
I like.
I got a question.
I would go to church
Oh,
if
oh.
we had if we had one, here. I would
Yeah.
definitely
Oh, yeah.
100% go.
We tried several times.
We've tried several times. Yeah, I would definitely go. Yes, Lila.
Oh, I was just, the church is the bride, but isn't this whole thing that we're gonna end up discovering that we're all the church, that all human beings
Right.
are the bride?
All human beings are the church, but not all human beings are being the church.
Oh, that's good.
I get what you're
That's
saying,
good.
Lila. Yeah,
I
it's
like that.
mankind. Yeah, we're all, yeah. But yeah, I get that. We're not all
Mm.
acting that out.
We're
Yeah.
not walking in that.
Well, yeah, the reason I bring it up is that, the traditions that surround me are the ones that believe, and I was so just delighted when I saw Baxter say that, how could you have the hubris to think that somehow this whole thing, like the key turns in the lock by our faith? I mean, how could we ever have been so prideful? And now that I see it, but that's the way most of the church still sees it.
Yep.
That it's each individual man or woman's faith that
Mhm.
gets you in the club or out of the club.
Mm.
And the consequences of being out of the club are horrendous.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I don't know if you guys do this, but it's constantly running through my mind, because my heart is now breaking for all these people that don't see what I see. I mean, like, I am blissfully happy because of what I see. The truth has set me free.
Mm.
And I want to share it with these people because they love God with all their heart, but they don't know him. And they're so scared of, how in the Passion Translation, the Song of Solomon, he goes, "My beloved, my equal, my bride." That would flip them out. They'd be like, "How dare you claim equality with God?" Anyway, these things are just constantly rolling around in the mind and the heart. And I guess it's like a Holy Spirit thing. And I have to believe that God is doing something all over the world, that somehow
Yeah.
these beautiful, wonderful, lovely people are going to experience the joy that I finally know. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but just the idea that,
Oh, well, he is. I mean, right? I mean, you look at the Apostle Paul, as Saul on the road to Damascus,
right,
and
right.
he said, "When it pleased the Father to reveal his son in me," and there's a moment that he speaks to each one of our hearts, and sometimes more than once, more than 10 times, more than 20 times, he just keeps speaking to our hearts until we hear it. And, and he does it so many different ways. I love that about God. I mean, for me, he used a friend of ours who now thinks I've gone way too far, but a friend of ours who introduced me to Steve McVeigh's books, which started me on to the Mirror Bible, which, just one thing after, and then Baxter, I mean, it just kept snowballing from that point on. But he thinks now I've gone too far, right? He just can't see it, but he loves Steve McVeigh's writings, so eventually, you know what, God is just going to speak something in that to his heart, and his eyes will just open. David says, isn't it in the same Psalm we're reading, where all of the earth, all of the world will know him, right? I can't think of the verse offhand, but they'll all, is that the every knee will bow, every tongue confess?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not a pressure deal. It's just because it's that overflow. It's just that you get that revelation. How could your knee not bow and your tongue confess? That he is, it just explodes
Adoration.
out of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you love it that the writer of Hebrews hits on the incarnation in, wow, right off the bat. I mean, we're barely into Hebrews, and he lays such a great foundation in chapters 1 and 2 on about Jesus and his incarnation. Yeah. Well, let's keep going, otherwise we'll never get to chapter 3 for next week. Mirror Bible says, dying our death was his doorway into our deepest fears. Boy, I love that. The New King James says, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death. That is the devil. Mirror Bible says he thus disengaged the dominion of the death that trapped the human race in a fallen mindset.
I like that.
So the word destroy is katargeo, meaning, and I've got a lot of notes here, so feel free just to jump in, really, because I can just get super excited. But destroy is katargeo. It means render useless, bring to naught, sever. I love that one. Sever, abolish, bring to an end, make void. It's an aorist word. It's finished. When did it happen? Through his death, right? Who held the power of death? The devil, diabolos, right? The Mirror Bible says the fallen mindset. Dia means through. Bolos comes from balo, which means cast down. The Mirror Bible says of balo, to cast down, thus referring a cast down condition and warped mentality that mankind inherited in their association with Adam's fall. So in my opinion, this is just me, Robin, this is way more than a fallen mindset, this diabolos, right? Although that's huge in and of itself, right? But through his death, he destroyed diabolos, who held the power of death. Diabolos, through the fall. Dia, through. Balo, fall, through the fall. Our minds were affected, but I believe it's referring to everything that came into the world as a result of the fall. Diabolos, right? Romans 5:12 says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world and death through sin, sin is hamartia, right? Ha and meros, without form, which is the opposite of 2 Corinthians 3:18. But we all with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord, right? Transform is metamorphe, and the stem of meta is
That phrase,
what's that? Go ahead.
that phrase is important. From glory to glory.
Yeah.
That phrase, it stands in opposition to this Romans road kind of approach to the gospel where you beat people over their head. It does not say from garbage to glory, from sinner to glory. It says from glory to glory.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, do you think, I've always thought that in this verse, he's talking about from the glory of Moses to the glory of Jesus, because that word from is away from glory to glory. It's a, it's not a progressive from, it's an absolute away from.
I think, yeah, and I think it's speaking to the two covenants.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Sin is distorted identity, though, right? Mirror Bible says sin is to live out of context with the blueprint of one's design, or to behave out of tune with God's original harmony. I like that. Adam introduced sin, right? He introduced a distorted identity, living out of context with our original design into the world, and death reigned through that distorted identity, right? All came because of the fall. Jesus, through his death, destroyed him who held the power of death, which reigned through sin, right? That is the devil, diabolos, through the cast down or through the fall. Mirror says the fallen mindset. So all that Adam introduced into the world, sin and death, came through the fall. Finished. All of Adam, undone. Death no longer reigns. It reigned only from Adam to the cross. At the cross, all of Adam died. Not one part of Adam survived. Finished. Paul asks at the beginning of chapter 6 in Romans, what shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Verse 2, certainly not. Or, heaven forbid, how shall we who died to sin live any longer in it? And then when you keep reading and you get down to verse 5 in Romans 6, we realize that the reason Paul's so passionate with his certainly not, or heaven forbid, was because there's no way to return to that previous life, right? What was the previous life? Enslaved to sin, because that old life no longer exists. right? He took away the sin of the world. There is no more sin. That's
Mm.
gone.
No.
Has to be, right? Through his death, he destroyed all of that. All of Adam died on the cross, right? What did Adam introduce into the world? Sin. If sin still remains, then all of Adam didn't die on the cross.
Okay, you got to stop because I'm losing you here.
Sorry.
Because I think the way I was able to work this out was the dominion of sin was destroyed, but that people
Sorry, babe.
still have the choice to, and or you wouldn't not even necessarily choice, they're still just living in the fallen mindset because I don't exactly know where to go here, but I mean, we see sin everywhere, all around us, and people are deceived everywhere. So how can we say that sin no longer exists? I can say that the authority of it no longer exists, and that if we knew who we were, we wouldn't give it, any the time of day. But it's there, isn't it? Somebody help me.
I don't think so. I think it's objective and subjective for sure. I think objectively, sin is completely done away with. Either he took it out of the world or he didn't.
The Lamb of God.
Okay.
But it's
Right.
subjective. We have some of us aren't experiencing that. I mean, until we realize that, right, then that's going to be something we can choose to walk in. Absolutely. But objectively, help me out, Bill. Is there an objective and a subjective in the
Yeah. So there's only one sin,
right?
and the one sin leads to the many sins. The one sin is the sin of unbelief.
Yes.
And Jesus, it's in Hebrews. I forget the exact verse. The writer says that he made the good confession for us.
Mm-hmm.
So Martin Luther was famous for saying, if at any moment you find yourself unable to believe, at least try to believe that Jesus is believing for you.
Come on, that's good.
So the sin of unbelief has been completely taken out of the world because Jesus is Emmanuel and is the vicarious representative human being who at all moments remains the eternal faithful Son of the Father and is believing the truth about you and your relation to him and the Father in the communion of the Holy Spirit. There's never a moment when you don't believe, but sometimes we don't believe we believe.
That's right.
I know that sounds confusing, and what that does when I am unable to see the faith that Jesus gives me, right? The life I live now, Paul says, in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God. The definite article is there twice. When I liken it to this. I did this in a Christian living class with some 9 and 10-year-olds at summer camp one time. I had we were in the dining room, and I had them raise all the blinds so there's plenty of light coming in, turn on all the lights. I mean, it was bright in that room. And what I did was I put my hand over my eyes and I started asking for the lights to be turned on. Did somebody turn some light on in here? I can't see a thing. And I'm just walking around the room with my hand over my eyes. And I started stumbling over chairs and, almost fell down. And these kids are just laughing like, what an idiot. There. That's what your unbelief looks like to the Father. You are walking around with your hand over your eyes, declaring that you see darkness when the entire cosmos is filled up with Jesus. When the New Testament says that he fills all, the word is pleroma.
Mm-hmm.
And pleroma in the Greek construct of the container universe, pleroma means like this cup. If I said, would you fill my coffee cup? Well, Davina fills my cup, but she doesn't fill it all the way up, right? Because I have to be able to manipulate it so there's no slip twixt cup and lip, right? But sometimes when you're feeling mischievous, like I might feel one of my buddies, I'll fill it up so that cohesion, surface tension is the only thing holding the liquid in. And the only choice they have is to get down and sip it like a dog, right? Ha ha ha. So pleroma doesn't mean the cup is half full, 3/4 full, or even full to the very, very top. Pleroma means the cup is so full, it has run out over the top onto the table, run off on the floor, filled up the room, broken the windows out, filled up my neighborhood, filled up my state, filled up my country, filled up the oceans, and has filled up the entire cosmos. When the Bible says that Jesus fills all, pleroma, he has. There's an old math equation that proves the impossibility of warp factor 10, because warp factor 10 is so fast, so much faster than the speed of light, that theoretically, if you ever reached warp factor 10, you would fill up the universe.
Mm.
Jesus is at warp factor 10.
Come on.
And he is the one who is steadfastly believing the truth about his Father on my behalf.
Yes.
So of course I believe, but his belief on my behalf does not negate my personhood and distinction. So I can still put my hand, he hasn't tied my hands behind my back. I can still put my hand over my eyes, and I can still walk in this false unbelief. It's not reality. It's not real, but it sure hurts like it's real.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh.
Great analogy.
Wow. Mm.
Great analogy.
Mm.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, it's just
Yeah,
dimensions,
that's-
man. It's,
wow.
you know, it's like dimensions,
Warp
man.
factor 10. I like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's reality within, you know, a true reality and then a false reality that, you know, man, it's whew.
I think the problem is we still see sin as behaviors, you know, and so we still see, because the truth is we don't live in a fallen world. There is nothing
It's
fallen.
redeemed, yeah.
It's fully redeemed.
Fully redeemed. Yeah, come on.
Fully redeemed.
I mean,
you
that's
know, I like that, Bill, about walking with your hand over your eyes, because yeah, there is only one reality. It's his, you know. Gehazi, you know, Gehazi says, and his name means like low vision, like low sight, you know. So Gehazi is afraid because, is he with Elisha? I think it's
Elisha, yeah.
And he's afraid because he sees these advancing armies, right? And Elisha just prays and says, Lord, open his eyes to see what I see, to see what's there, you
See
know.
the
And
reality.
he opens his eyes and he sees the reality is that the host of the angel armies is much greater than the armies that are there. Now, did God just drop that host of angel armies right down
No,
there when he opened Gehazi's eyes, or were they always there? Just Gehazi didn't have sight to see it, you know, until his eyes were open. There's a reality that is so real that sin and death have completely been done away with, you know. And once we grab a hold of that, our life changes, because if sin and death have been completely done away with, then why am I not living this abundant life that he promised I could live? And then you realize, well, yeah, why am I not living this
Come
abundant
on,
life? I
come
should
on,
be living this
come on.
abundant life, but I've made things too normal. I've made death normal. I've made sickness normal. I've made disease and lack and all of those things that came as a result of the fall normal. But there is no fall anymore. Jesus so completely reversed it that it no longer exists. From the Father's perspective, it's as if the fall never happened.
That's right. Come on.
Yeah.
That could be ours.
Come on.
Lord, open our eyes to see, you know.
Yeah. Where was that?
Yeah, and Robin, sometimes I think about it too. Maybe for me, I need simple. I think about, because I used to watch ice skating in the Olympics a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, there was a point where somebody did they did like a triple, whatever. And they're like, oh, wow, that's so incredible. And they're like, oh, well, I can do that. So like, then that became the normal, right? Everybody's like, well, I'm going to do a triple, whatever, you know? So it's just that you don't realize that that's possible. And then when you start, everybody starts living like, yeah, well, of course we can all do the triple, whatever, because we can. So it becomes very normal.
Yeah.
And here we are. Yeah, here each one of us are at this point. It's like, okay, I see that, Lord. Yeah, let's go.
Mm.
And then
Yeah. And as much as we struggle,
that's good.
Can you imagine sitting in this group with someone from the 1st or 2nd century church.
Oh man, how
And
fun.
you tell them, well, I have this box on my kitchen table, and inside of this box, I have access to 19 different translations of the Bible.
Mhm.
Mm.
And they would say, well, when you say Bible, what do you mean? Because they didn't have a New Testament Bible until the 5th century.
That's right.
And the church grew faster in that time period than it did after, so there was a way that Francois translated part of this, and I'm struggling to go back to it, where you mentioned it. It's the undoing of the fall.
Mhm.
What was that? Yeah, man, I can't remember. But anyway,
The blueprint. Something.
yeah, if you in Luke, where it's the only synoptic where the conversation between Jesus and the thieves is recorded. And the one thief, he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Right.
And Jesus says, in a minute, you'll be with me in paradise.
Mhm.
Well, there are scant few Aramaic words that are preserved in the New Testament translations, and that's one of them. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani is probably the most famous of all the Aramaic, but the word paradise is not Greek. It's Aramaic, paradisos.
Mm.
And the interesting thing about paradisos, it is a word the Hebrews used to refer to paradisal man, right? Mankind in the garden before the fall is what this word paradise meant to them. Paradise wasn't like, oh, this is a great little spot. We got our toes in the sand, like the song says, I got my butt in the sand, my toes in the surf, or however it goes. No, paradisos meant specifically to the Hebrews, the garden before the fall.
Oh, I like that.
And Jesus says, and I asked Baxter, and when was it? It's 2007. We went down there and we spent the weekend, and Davina and Beth went, I don't know what you guys went and did, hung out, talked. Well, I got 8 hours. If you read The Great Dance, this lake in the book. All right, so I got 8 hours with Baxter and Dr. Ken Blue in a fishing boat on that lake. And we caught giant largemouth bass all day long. And Baxter said, Bill, today is your day. You ask whatever questions you want to ask. And I mean, I had a pile of them. And in fact, at the end of the day, he told Davina, he said, I think if I unscrewed the top of that boy's head, it would just look like a bunch of fish, a bunch of theological questions swimming around in there like fish. But that was one of my questions. Do you think what Jesus was telling this thief on the cross, in a minute, I am going to unite myself, who is myself, the creator of all things, who is not confined to space and time. In a moment, I am going to, in my death and resurrection, I will unite myself, because he says, when I'm lifted up on the cross, I will draw all mankind into myself. I will unite myself so thoroughly with humanity that humanity will now be bound to the same eternal timelessness, spacelessness, unlimited nature that I share. So in a moment, I am getting ready to undo the fall.
Oh.
In a moment, you will be with me in paradisos.
Wow.
Oh, I love that.
Come on.
Wow.
And Baxter's answer was, that's a beautiful thought, but I don't think you can draw doctrine out of one verse, but he said it's a good thought. But I mean, there's got to be a reason why that Aramaic word was preserved.
Was the other thief also with him in paradise?
I would say the answer to that would be yes, just like the older brother in the parable.
Yep.
Last word of the father to the older brother in the parable is, you are always with me. You stand out
He
here.
was just going like this.
Yeah, he's just standing outside with his hand over his eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Ron.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Very
good.
good.
Oh,
Wow.
that's so good. I
That's
like
amazing. That
I love
that is a shouting bit right there. Wow, wow, wow. Come on.
when you realize,
Goodness of
even
God.
as if the fall never existed, that we do not live in a fallen world. It is the Father's very good.
Mm,
When you realize that we're not going back to what Adam had in the garden. That's it.
New creature.
No,
That never existed.
it's a new, never before existed
never existed.
creation that we are,
Wow.
and
Thanos.
we take Hebrews 2:14 and through his death he destroyed the devil, and man, in the church we get so enemy conscious, so devil minded, we make that, and we don't realize what this is all saying,
Right.
that, oh my gosh, this is it. He's talking the incarnation, he's talking about Jesus did in his death, that all of us died with him, all of that, he took all sin, all death, all of it died on the cross, right? All of Adam.
On.
Yeah, because in this verse, diabolos doesn't mean literally the devil, like
Nope.
Lucifer, fallen Lucifer. It
There's no
refers
the.
to-
Is there?
Yeah.
I think there's a the.
It refers to
Accuser? Or is it-
let's see, I'll check. Let's see. I've got my New Revised Standard with the interlinear open. Where is verse 14?
So do you think Jesus is going back and choosing the tree of life for us instead of
He is the tree of life, right? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it is. There is a the, and it does say that he might destroy the one who has the power of death, and he says that is the devil, the writer does. But still, what is it? What at least what I see in verse 14 that makes this about the fallen mind is that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the enemy, when we're
Yeah.
talking about
Mm.
the devil.
No.
We're talking about a fallen, or rather than say fallen, it's probably better to say mythological way of seeing yourself, creation, and God.
I
Mm.
like that.
Mm.
I like
Right?
that.
It's
Yeah.
a mythological way.
I like that. Mythological.
And that's why Jesus says, hey, some of you, I'm just going to look at I'll look right at you and say, depart from me, I never knew you, because that's not the real you.
That's
This you
good.
that you're presenting, that ain't real.
That's so good. That's so good.
I don't know this you. I know the broken you. I don't know the dressed up for church you. I know the real you.
Mm.
I like that.
So get this fake you out of here, and let's me and the real you have a conversation.
Mm.
Oh, I like that. Because the truth is, he's already brought all sons to glory, right? All sons. Father has sons of obedience and he has sons of disobedience. And that word disobedience just means they don't believe yet. They haven't been persuaded. It has nothing to
Right.
do with obedience. It has to do with believing.
Mm.
They just
Right.
haven't believed yet.
Mm.
Yeah, that's why when Jesus calls people lost, I mean that ought to bring so much hope to us. So
Amen.
I mean it, because he didn't say strays. The difference between us, I had this guy show up at my church one time, and he just, we had a Christian living class before the service started, and he was like making a wreck, like just vomiting all over the place. No, the Trinity is a pagan satanic doctrine, and just like messing up the cornflakes, as they say. And I just let him talk. And one of my longtime church members came up to me later and said, how come you just let that guy keep talking? I said, look, either the gospel is true or it isn't. Either Jesus is who he says he is or he's not. And he doesn't need me to defend his name.
That's right.
That's
They
right.
can't be
So
done.
while I'm preaching, this guy sat on the front row and he had his arms crossed, and it was amazing because I didn't love him in my heart at that moment, while he was at church. I wasn't loving on him in my heart. But you see, the thing is, Jesus has a man on, I've got a man on the inside. His name is Jesus, right? I got a mole in there. And Jesus is going to work all during the service. And so I make this point. I said, what's the difference between a lost dog and a stray dog? And the only person in the room that spoke up was the agitator. And he said, the lost dog belongs to someone.
Mm,
Exactly.
The Lord broke through that rock hard shell. Well, I won't say he broke through from the inside out. And that guy got it. When Jesus says they're lost, he's telling you they belong to me.
Amen.
No, he never came back, but
That's
Oh,
good.
that's
I didn't take it personally. If I'd have loved him good, I might have, but I didn't love him.
that's so
Wow.
good.
So, I'm really listening to everything, and I, on the one hand, it all makes, I mean, I know all of this. And the thing that I'm wondering about is, I'm sure, have you all read The Great Divorce?
Yeah, C.S.
By
Lewis.
C.S. Lewis? That, these people come from hell to kind of a way station to heaven, and the guy, the main character, realizes that they're not real, that the grass is coming up through their feet. And but the angels who are basically coming to get them and lead them all the way to heaven are quite real and substantial. And I guess I'm trying to think, is that a way for me to think of what is going on in the minds and hearts of people everywhere that we see in this world? I mean, they are in unbelief. I guess what I've come to is, I know who they really are. I have
Yep.
no doubt that. I'm very certain that Jesus will end up persuading them one way or another, at one, if you want to say, at time or another, although that's kind of a weird construct these days. But I understand what you're saying, Robin, that, I mean, he destroyed sin. So that makes sense to me. And yet I'm going, well, but what do I see around me everywhere? I mean, I see a lot of unbelief. And I love what you guys said about disobedience, because that's just awesome. I'm just having to try to wrap my mind around what I take in with my five senses, like that realm. And I think that is the lesser real realm. Like, I often in my writings refer to reality as being the realm of Father, Son, and Spirit. It is this.
Mhm.
And yet we're living like, I don't know, here's another C.S. Lewis, but in The Last Battle, everybody's like seeing heaven and walking into heaven, but these few dwarves who are stuck in this hut, but it's there is no hut, but
Yeah.
they see it.
They're in the
And they're
meadow.
like, they hate this nasty, dark, awful hut. Why
There's like
complaining and
pee
they're angry.
and manure and
Right. And they can't see that there is no hut, and it's all light and beautiful and lovely. So anyway, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around what it is that we see in the realm that we kind of spend our time in. Anyway,
yeah.
if anybody
So
could
Lila,
help.
one year after camp, after we got all the campers on buses and parents had picked them up, we would sit around for a few hours and do a debrief and just share some stories, victories, or we would, always have a time to say, all right, best practices, what went well, what didn't go well. And someone made the comment, it's just a shame that we have to go back to do you remember this? That we have to
The
go
real world.
to the real world.
That's good, Beth. Yeah.
And our one of our senior, or not, she wasn't senior, she's younger than we are, but she'd been there since she was 17 years old. Now she was in leadership. She had this moment of clarity. You could see it on Tab's face, and she said, no, this is the real world.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way everybody loves on one another. and is so kind and good and focused on Christ and other centered, this is the real world.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're going back to the fake world.
That's right.
Mm.
That's accurate. Well, that's good.
Yep.
So Robin, when you say
That's good.
sin doesn't exist, it's almost like I could think of it that sin is like part of the unreal world, or I guess that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, it's either all of Adam was undone or parts of it were left. And if parts
be
of it
both.
were left, well, then we have a problem because then he didn't finish it.
Yeah, it can't be
You
both.
know?
Well, that all makes sense to me, but I don't understand. Well, then why do people kill each other?
Well, I mean, they just, in my opinion, still walking in a distorted identity. They just don't know who they are. You know,
Right.
they just haven't experienced the love of the Father. You know, I love Bill's analogy, you know, covering his eyes and walking in, you know, a room that's filled with light. I mean, he is the light of the world, John says, who lightens every man
Mhm.
who
Yes,
comes
light.
into the world.
Yeah.
Every
Mhm.
person born has that
Mhm.
light on the inside. You
Mhm.
know, you have to completely close your eyes to not see light. I mean, I do love that analogy. I mean, that's the way I figure people are still walking. I mean, they haven't come into that understanding. You know, I mean,
Well, I haven't come into it fully. I mean, I'm still getting mad at my husband sometimes, you know.
oh, we're still all doing that. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
you know, but I mean, look at Paul should give us hope. You know, here he was, Saul, right? And he is on his way to kill Christians. He is just terrible. I mean, he's like the worst of the worst. He is a terrorist, you know, what
Yeah.
we would call a terrorist today.
Yeah.
And on his way to kill Christians,
A known terrorist.
stone Stephen, a known terrorist.
Known.
People are
I mean,
afraid
they
of him.
knew. Yeah.
You know, and then you got poor Ananias, and the Lord tells him to go, you know, lay hands on Paul. Can you imagine being Ananias? Who tells you,
Hey,
"No,
Lord, I'm not sure I heard you right.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, get behind me, Satan." Yeah, no, I don't think
The
I'd
martyr
wanna do
mission.
that.
Martyr
Yeah.
mission.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a martyr today. Definitely be closing up shop. But you know, I mean, here he is on his way, and yet he's so zealous for what he thinks is God, and he's killing Christians. I mean, he's definitely walking in a distorted mindset. But then
A
he
reality.
has that revelation.
A
you
reality.
know? He saw the light.
Yeah.
Where was that light? That light was on the inside of him, right? Galatians. When it pleased the Father to reveal the Son in me, right? When he woke up, when he took his hands away, and funny thing, he went blind, but you know, I mean, that's also great, but he saw it. But until then, he's walking in that horrible mindset, which shows us that people can still walk in that today. But then it also gives you hope that, boy, when they see that light on the inside, their lives are going to radically change.
And it is happening around the world. You know, you have to, I mean, it's easy to see, to look out your window, open the news, turn on the television, whatever. I mean, open a paper and you see so much junk, you know, and yeah, these are
Well,
people,
how many hundreds of thousands killed in Turkey in these earthquakes?
yeah. And you know, and I don't know what to even say about that, you know.
Well, don't you think it would happen sooner, this awakening, if the church wasn't still preaching garbage? I mean, I love
yeah.
the church, but if they weren't just preaching garbage, preaching that we are still in a fallen world, preaching that we are still sinners in Adam. No Adam survived the cross, you know? You go to Joshua 3, I put it in my notes tonight, but we won't go there. But you know, it rolled back to Adam, right?
Right,
The
right.
waters
river,
rolled back, and it says it rolled back, and it says in Hebrew, ha'adam ma'adam, and I'm sorry, ba'adam. Ba'adam is in Adam, and Ma'adam is from Adam. So everything that was in Adam, all of that distortion he was walking in and passing on to generations. Peter talks about, you know, walking in the futility of their fathers, you know, the things passed down generation to generation, and all that came from Adam, was rolled back. It was finished. And Joshua says, this is how you're going to know that the living God is within you. This is how you're going to know. And then he tells you in verse 16 that he would roll it all back to Adam, right? In Adam, from Adam, and that all of the enemies, and he mentions 7 enemies by name, which means complete, all enemies, right? All enemies would be dealt with. All enemies would be destroyed. This is how you know you're in the living God, that the living God lives within you, is that all of Adam will be completely undone and all of those enemies completely destroyed. And yet in the church, we make such a big deal about, oh, the devil, oh, Satan, oh, demons, oh, enemies. What enemies?
Yeah.
We don't live in a fallen world.
Yeah,
He
we
has no enemies. God has no enemies, right? He has no enemies. He can't have any enemies. We have no enemies. There is nothing I need to bind. There's nothing. I know we talked about this last week. Nothing I need to, loose. There's no devil I need to do spiritual warfare after. How will I know? Because he lives within me. And he doesn't live within me so that my warfare will get better. Right? He lives within
The living
me.
God.
The living God.
Come on.
There's nothing outside
Jesus,
of that.
thank you,
And if
Lord.
we would stop preaching as a church, being in Adam, being depraved sinners, having to run to the altar and say a prayer, that little magic prayer that we say, so that the sky Jesus, I just read that the other day, Don Keathley, I love that, so that the sky Jesus will come and live in our hearts, how crazy. And hey, I taught the same thing. I looked at some of my Bible study notes and I taught about the sky Jesus and I taught about spiritual warfare and all of that. But when I finally understood, and I'm still understanding, it's definitely a progression, but when I finally grabbed a hold of the fact that all sin and all death, because death was the effect of sin, it could only reign as long as sin was in the world, right? So if both of those are done, oh man, it truly is finished. We are completely redeemed. We are completely free to live an abundant life. And we
That's
just
awesome.
that good news. As we can share that good news, then people will wake up because the light's already on the inside of them. John was pretty clear about that. Nobody comes into this world in darkness. How we miss that verse, I have no idea. I'm thinking we missed quite a few verses, years ago. You got to
Robin,
all those verses. Yeah.
You mentioned you made a reference to Romans 8:37. We're more than conquerors.
Yeah, I love that.
That Greek word for more than conquerors, it's huponikomen.
Yeah.
And I had to go get my Bible because I got a marginal note about it that I wrote in there. It's conquered to such a degree that there is no fight left to fight. That's what huponikomen means.
Oh, I love that.
More than conquerors. Paul is saying exactly what you said. What fight?
Oh, I love that.
Enemy. I mean, what enemy?
Well, Jesus said that when he said it is finished, tetelestai. It's a military word that means put your weapons down, go home, the battle's over. You don't have to stand on a porch with your gun waiting for an enemy to come. There is no enemy coming. You won. The battle's done. It's all over. The war has been won.
Amen.
Amen.
Oh, so good.
Oh, I like that word, Bill.
So good.
More than conquerors.
So
Oh, that's so good. All right, let's finish Hebrews.
Oh.
Hebrews 2:15, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Gosh, I love that. We could camp out there for a week. Mirror Bible says he brought final closure to their idea of judgment. Oh, that's so good. No judgment. First, we're not waiting on God to show that big reel in the sky, that video thing, the big movie of my life and every bad thing I've done. Boy, you'd be in trouble. But all the bad things my reel wouldn't be as long.
Are you pulling out the DVDs or what?
Every bad thing we ever did, ever said, ever thought. Gosh, ever thought. My reel might be longer than that. But all of that. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's
Come
no
on.
great judgment
on.
coming. He gave all judgment to the Son, and the Son judged us righteous, right? He justified us.
Thank you, Father.
That's so good.
So-
No judgment coming.
Mm.
Verse 16, this is why it is so relevant to understand that Jesus did not arrive on the planet in a celestial form or a Superman. He is the seed of Adam. Verse 17, he therefore completely assimilated every detail of his human family so that as chief priest,
Yeah.
so good,
Mm.
standing face to face before God. Oh man, that's so good. But we'll leave that because we're going to get into later in Hebrews where he's the priest. His compassion and unwavering faith would prevail effectively over the lies that they believed about themselves. Ooh, that's good. That really wraps up what we were talking about tonight. His compassion, his unwavering faith would prevail effectively over the lies they believed about themselves, having fully accomplished their at-one-ment.
Mm.
Verse 18, he experienced mankind's temptation with the same intensity and under the same scrutiny, and powerfully represents them with immediate effect. So good.
Mm.
The Mirror Bible says, in his incarnate human body, Jesus victoriously faced every onslaught that we would ever possibly encounter. I like Mike Miller talks
Mm.
about that in his book. I think it's his book, Been There, Done That. And he talks about how Jesus, when he was in the tomb, those 3 days, he went into every place that you will ever go in life. Jesus has already been there, and we were there with him, right? Because we've always been with him. We were in his debt. That coffee cup, Bill, the coffee cup, wherever that coffee cup goes, that coffee goes with it, right? So he went into every place we will ever face in life, and we were right there with them. And he got the victory, more than a conqueror, right? And so every place you face in life, every situation, every circumstance, every temptation, every illness, every doctor's report, everything, you've already been in that place with Jesus. That moment recognizes you because you've already been there. How? I don't know. That's like Matrix stuff. That's
Interstellar.
like Interstellar. Man.
Interstellar.
You've already been there, and you've already got the victory in every single thing you face in life. Done deal. It is finished. Complete redemption. How awesome is that?
Mhm.
Gosh, it makes you kind of want to go back and do chapter 2 all over again because it was so many parts. I don't think I've ever gotten so much out of Hebrews 2.
Hallelujah.
As I did with you guys. I mean, it is just a phenomenal.
I like that.
chapter.
It recognizes you.
It recognizes you
Yeah, that stood out to me. That moment recognizes you.
Yeah, as the victor.
as the victor.
As the victor, as
Mhm.
whole, as fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
that situation recognizes you. So when tomorrow comes, tomorrow recognizes you as
You've already been there.
Jesus.
And so you just say,
Come on.
that doctor report,
on.
oh no,
Come
I am
on.
healed, I am
Come
whole, I am
on.
complete. He was complete. Jesus had the fullness of the Godhead in bodily form,
Yep,
and we
we
are
are
complete in
Yeah.
him. We lack
Come on.
nothing. Doctor gives you a report. Oh no.
Life.
Life is on the inside of me. And Zoe life, resurrection life. And if life is on the inside of us and light, nothing else.
That's right.
There's
Come
no
on.
room for anything else. He fills your entire body,
The
every
greater-
nerve, every cell,
He fills
every muscle,
all-
everything,
DNA, every blood vessel, every organ, every tissue, every member.
G,
Come on,
God
come on.
blood running through your veins.
name
There's
it,
there's a translation, and I don't know the name, I can't think of the name of it, where it says we have the DNA of
the
God
blood of Jesus.
himself.
That's right. That's right.
His
That's
DNA.
That's right. That's right.
That's
Come on.
good news.
That's good.
Yeah.
Amen.
Life.
Amen. Well, we'll go on to
Come on.
chapter 3 next time.
Life, baby.
It's so good.
So good.
Yeah. Awesome.
Jesus,
So good.
amazing.
That's one of those chapters makes you want to jump around and run around the church. You know?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. It might be me.
And there you go. Around the church my time or two.
Oh,
Definitely done.
it's
that.
all good. We'll just shut it down. Okay.
All right, guys.
Awesome. Wow. it's amazing.
Okay.
Anything
Good night.
else?
Howard.
Good night. Gotta go for supper.
Good
Oh,
night,
all
Howard.
right.
Love
Good
you
night.
so much. I'll see you next week. Chapter 3. We'll see how far we get.
Okay.
Okay.
Rock and load. We need you.
Yeah.